recommendations? If not, that's okay. So these are just a few to consider and maybe use in the future. So here's Saul. For those of you who weren't able to join us, this is Saul Rescon Salazar. He is 16. He is a student at Brophy. He attended St. Matthew's School, which is a twin school, for all of his education. He was brought to the US from Mexico when he was about 1. He didn't know he was undocumented until he was older. And as such, he is not able to participate in activities with his classmates. That's a point of frustration for him. He's a good student. Brophy College Prep is a very competitive boys Catholic Jesuit high school. He was joined by his family friend, and there you go, and Principal Michael Guerra. Okay, so some of the suggestions that Saul recommended. He advocates and encourages us to consider students individually, learn their circumstances, think of how this is a case-by-case issue. They may all have DACA, these students in our schools, some of them anyway, but their circumstances are very different, their needs are different, and every family is different. And he demonstrated how important it is to get involved on the local, state, and federal levels. There is such a difference geographically in this issue. The laws, the way the laws are being implemented, the approaches, the need are all very, very different. So the local context matters tremendously. We'll have a chance to talk more about this in a minute. There are frequent updates and changes with DACA on a daily basis, even last night at 11 p.m. Eastern. Trying to keep informed when many of us don't have a legal background is difficult, but it's something that would help so that you can help your families in your schools. We need to advocate for them because they cannot do so themselves necessarily, either because of language or circumstances. And this is not just a southern border issue. I think until recently, I never really thought of it this way, and perhaps you didn't either. I grew up on the Great Lakes. I was literally on the Canadian border. I knew this because we would get Canadian television all the time growing up. And we'd go to Canada. My grandmother would go to Canada to get her medicine. It was cheaper. But I never really thought of this as a border issue. In New England, folks are coming in over the border illegally, but we aren't talking about it the same way that we're talking about what's happening on the southern border of the United States. And that was something that was important to solve. That's something that I think those of us who are closer to the northern border or international boundaries, such as Logan Airport, these are things we need to be talking about across the country. It's not just a southern border issue. Okay, so here is his teacher and family friend, and now principal, Mr. Guerra. Mr. Guerra teaches religion and Spanish, and he is now the full-time principal. Remarkable guy, very dedicated to the school. So he runs voter registration drives. He has the support of his pastor, even more so lately. They have talked about how important it is to know who to call if an immigrant is arrested or detained. You have to really know those families. They need to be sensitive to the worries and concerns within the school community. So if you joined us on the webinar or watched it, Michael shared an anecdote that was really powerful for his school community. That this is the area of Sheriff Arpaio. And regardless of your opinions of Arpaio, he was very polarizing when he was the sheriff. And one of the sheriff's cars happened to be parked near the school for an unrelated issue. And they had whole bunches of families that were refusing to come to the school to pick up their children at the end of the day because that sheriff was parked there. I mentioned in the webinar that my husband's cousins are police officers. My husband's an Air Force veteran. My husband's cousins rely on the community for information and to help them do their jobs effectively. Having a good relationship is very, very important. I have empathy for both sides of this issue, but understanding the sensitivity that such a Sheriff's W car could have, the impact that could have on the just by seeing it there. That's something that maybe Michael Guerra can't fix, but he can try to negotiate. Even if that sheriff's deputy was a fantastic person and not out to arrest or detain anyone, just had a question, there are different ways to handle that. And they've learned from that. And I was just speaking with Yvette Salazar, the assistant principal at St. Matthew's, and this is something that they are learning from. Small things like this make a big, big, big difference. And understanding the local context is essential. Things are a little bit less tense now that Sheriff Arpaio is no longer the sheriff, but that anxiety is still there. So that's something that they're thinking about and trying to operate a little differently. You may have heard on the webinar how, and Liz was part of this discussion, I was thinking about you, Liz, when I was putting this together. St. Matthew's does not have written plans if a DACA recipient parent is detained or arrested. They've done that purposefully. In their minds, it protects the families. Some schools do have written plans. When I was teaching, I taught for a while in Florida and also in Texas, as I've mentioned before. I knew which students were without papers. I don't believe there was ever a written plan, but at the same time, I wouldn't know what to do if that child's parent was arrested or detained. So there is a critical issue here of, if you're not going to have something written down or something that the teacher can access, somebody's got to know the plan. And maybe that's something we can talk about here in a few minutes. There's all kinds of liability and complexity with that. But St. Matthew's has chosen not to have it written down. I suspect it's all in Michael's head. They have a lot of trust there, though, and they advocate for the DACA families on a regular basis. They write they write letters, they attend court hearings, they have made some very meaningful connections to immigration organizations, and the families trust them, which is very, very important. Because they also demonstrate how much they understand the complexity of this. Saul himself is a DACA recipient, as are his parents. His little brothers, who are also enrolled at St. Matthew's, are US citizens. So this is very complex, right? Because I know in some of our schools, the parents are the DACA recipients, but the students enrolled are US citizens. There are other families where perhaps the child is a DACA recipient, but living with American relatives. There are so many complexities to this. It's not a simple issue. And Michael Guerra and Yvette Salazar have demonstrated how much they want to know the families and how they want to respect the complexity of the issue. And so that this is going a long way to build rapport and trust with their immigrant families in their schools. So let's talk about this a little bit. What are some ideas that have worked in your school or in your community? So we can start to jump in. We have Megan joining us from Omaha. Thank you for joining us, Megan. I hope you can hear me okay.
I can, thank you.
Welcome. So this is a perfect time to join us. Would you like to, or anyone really, share what's worked in your community and or in your school?
Well, I was going to say, I think ours is still more informal in the schools, in that the main secretary and our outreach advancement, our outreach and enrollment person are both bilingual, and they have a lot of the parents' trusts, and so they're the ones with everything in their head as to who is related to who and who they might call, who they have permission to call if a child needs to go home in an emergency. But it was one of our parishes, the 5 founding parishes, that had talked about they had to have on file for the church to take a role in helping families move kids to other places. They had to have it on file at their church so that they could follow the parents' wishes, so that they could prove that they were following the parents' wishes.
Can I clarify, Liz? So I think what you're saying is that when they register to be members of a parish, if they wanted the parish to participate or help them out in a critical situation, they had to complete some form to say, if I am detained, I want you to help me get my children to my sister, or...
That was one of our founding parishes. I don't know about the other two that also a lot of our Latino children come from, but one parish made it really, they had a very strict plan that they were following, and parents had to fill out forms, and they had to be documented in their parish office before they would act as the intermediary if a parent got taken away.
It's very powerful. Okay, so that is working though. You consider that to be an effective policy?
I mean, it's one way to know what to do with the kids. I think we're looking at being designated as a sanctuary church. And so what they had to more legalistic, I think, than the other two parishes. So the other, we don't have forms on file, but like I said, ours is more informal, kind of like Matt's is, that there are key people in our organization who know the families and know who we can call and who we can't call.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, the idea of, thank you for clarifying, the idea of becoming a sanctuary parish. We have a few here in the Boston area. It's good to know which are which, I suppose, and having a really good rapport with the pastor and the lay leadership so that everyone can be on the same page. Very good, thank you. Especially if they're feeding into your school. Other ideas or policies that are working in your school or your community? Megan, would you like to share?
Sure. We do have, as part of the Archdiocese, we have the Latino Enrollment Office. Mm-hmm. It's become, it's definitely still new for us. I think Beatriz Arianes is the main coordinator of that office, and her outreach efforts have been amazing. And so it's growing more and more into being this very trusted place for our families to go to and talk. Like just today, I was talking to one of the people in that office, and we discovered how we could apply to get free internet service for our families.
Oh, that's excellent.
Mm-hmm. So it's so I think it's for us in Omaha, it's still in its infancy stages, mm-hmm. but I'm glad we have almost like a home where we're starting to grow. Not just an outreach program for, because it really started with this idea of how do we reach out to our Hispanic families to come and be a part of us in our Catholic schools, but it's growing into more of a resource place for people to go and seek out help.
That's an interesting observation, and the need for it. And Betty, do you want to talk more about that since she mentioned your good work? I'm gonna unmute you. There we go. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Megan for your kindness.
Hola, Beatriz.
Hola. It's awesome to work with all this team of people in the Archdiocese. And yeah, this office opened 3 years back, and we start reaching out in our community of Latinos, invite them to enroll in a Catholic school. Since then, we enroll 620 students in Catholic schools, grade schools, and high schools. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's clear for me that is no, I mean, the families are coming not just asking for a Catholic schools. They are in need of many other things. One of them, and it is very, very important, is immigration status for parents and for students. So we have done many things trying to help them. The first step, it was working with government of Mexico.
Okay.
And with Catholic Charities, they have an office for immigration.
Okay.
So we made sessions with them, both of them, with the Consulate of Mexico and Catholic Charities together.
Okay.
To tell the parents resources, ideas, all about the immigration situation. So the problem was the parents don't like to get together in a place. They think that they are in risk. So we have little by little just helping and giving them the places where can offer them for those resources or help.
So you've said many fascinating things. I just want to touch on a little bit. Yours is the first time I've heard anyone say something about reaching out to a consulate, which I think is really interesting that we haven't heard that yet, of anyone reaching out to a consulate of any kind, Mexican or otherwise, to see what they can do to advocate for these families, because that is their citizenship technically. So that's really interesting. I think very positive. Additionally, the anecdote about the families being uncomfortable getting together in one location is heartbreaking, but very practical, isn't it? It's happened. It's happened when there's a raid. They're still talking about a raid. There's a town called New Bedford on the ocean here. They had a huge raid, huge, hundreds of people detained, all who worked in this one building, this one factory. I've shared in the webinar previously that my great-grandmother was illegal and was worried about it until she passed away in 95, age of 95. It's a fear that has real roots, and acknowledging that and trying to adjust to meet those needs, I think is the right thing to do. Makes sense to me. It's great that there's this partnership that you're describing between Catholic Charities in Omaha, the Mexican consulate, the Catholic schools. This seems very effective. This is great partnership and teamwork.
Yeah, it has been both of them very supporting with us, and we are working. I mean, the Consulate of Mexico has been very open and willing to work with us because I asked them to visit our schools and see how many kids we are serving. As most of our Latinos, our community, are from Mexico. So the Council of Mexico was surprised at the beginning, and then she learned about our Spanish class, and I mean, she was happy.
Good.
What she saw, and she shared with more people about the good experience she has seeing our schools. Since then, we have been working together in other projects. We have worked with, it's not related in immigration, but it's about education. It's about a drawing contest, and we had a winner. I can say it's through the government of Mexico. It's a contest. It's for all the world. So we had a winner here. It was very nice. We have
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal. We have had we call in Spanish the Niña Consul for a day. Is a girl or boy consul for a day. So it's a contest. They write down essay, and then 3 years. And it's just about education, and
and aspiring, right? Aspiring to be something important, significant, a leader in the community.
Yeah, because they spent the day, the winners, it was a girl, well, 2 years they were a girl, the winner, and she spent the day in the consulate as a consul. I mean, she was in the desk, she was signing some documents, she was in the window serving the community. It was a very nice experience. So it was a national news, we crossed over to Mexico, and it was very nice. I mean, we have done many things together, and we're just trying to serve the community because it's our vocation, I think.
Yes. Yes. I like how you put that. It's a calling, it's a mission, and a ministry to serve our neighbors like this. Yes. But to bring in the consulate's brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah.
That should happen everywhere.
Yeah. And well, it's all about the schools. Has Megan, has Chris Nelson is in this webinar, and it's the good job we are working together. They have been very supportive with our families, with me when we are working in some projects or some family need. They have been a big piece in this success.
Awesome. Well, Chris, now it's on you. You're called out. So the schools in Omaha are discerning and getting ready and enrolling for next year. So it's early days yet, but lots of good work has already been done.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep, that's absolutely true.
Do you want to describe your role, Chris?
So really, I'm just a support to our consortium schools and to all the archdiocese. So my job is really just to access professional development opportunities, education for our staff and teachers, and to help coordinate that all from the archdiocesan level.
Okay, so it's a lot of partnerships and connections that you're making to bring the principals and teachers what they need.
Absolutely.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, here's a tough question for everybody. What has not worked well? What is something that you'd recommend not doing, or perhaps doing in a different way? It's a delicate thing trying to protect a child's immigration status or his or her parents' immigration status. How can we learn from each other in a different way? What would you not recommend doing? And you can not share too if you'd rather. That's fine. We often talk about successes, and I think we can learn a lot from mistakes or things we could do differently. For instance, I'll share one to get us started. When I was teaching, so my husband was active duty in the Air Force, and we were all over the place. Oddly, not in Nebraska. Somehow we missed that one. But Utah and Texas and Florida and all these places. There was a student that was in my class off and on. We were in the panhandle of Florida. My team teacher and the assistant principal said, don't ask him his status. Don't ask him for anything. It's just good he's here. We're worried about him. He's undocumented. His English is limited. We're just happy when he's here. So don't ask anything of him. Just say hello. Make sure he eats lunch. Don't make him nervous. Looking back on it, while I believe that came from a place of kindness, I think we missed out. We could have really tried, and I was a new teacher, newly minted, learning things as I went. But I think we really could have tried to make sure he was okay, that we could have found somebody could speak his dialect of Spanish, or at least try to reach out to his parents, make sure he was living in a safe place. This town is a military town. There are some good spots and bad spots. And we should have found out why he wasn't there. Instead of being grateful when he did show up, find out where he was when he wasn't there. And maybe the principals knew more and they just didn't feel comfortable because they didn't want to put me in a position to know more than I should because I wasn't legally liable to this child. I don't know. But if nothing else, there should have been better communication. And I think about that kid a lot. He was a migrant, or his parents were migrant farm workers. And so when he showed up, the staff was supposed to be really grateful. And when he wasn't there, we just hoped that he came back the next day. I don't like that. So that's something that I think if I were in that position again, I would do differently. Other thoughts?
I think it's a good beginning. It's not ask about the status. Yes.
So if a new child were to enroll, what would you recommend? If Megan or someone like Megan were okay getting all this information, the child wants to join the school, and what kind of questions should be asked, or what should be asked differently?
In fact, in any of our documents, there is that question. It's nothing about their status, legal or illegal status. It's It's out of question. We don't ask never about that.
What I was going to add to, in all of our application and registration documents, that's not something we ever bring up or ask. I think the closest we ever come up is at home, what language do you speak? You know, what was the first language your students first spoke when they were for their early literacy skills? Is that something that that people ask about in other schools?
Liz, do you want to take that one? Because you've got multiple languages in your school, though you're a Spanish-English school.
Yeah, we do have to do a home language survey. That's required to get, because we have Title I and Title III in our building. We also have a hot lunch program. So we have to follow the Minneapolis Public Schools and have a home language survey. We also in Minnesota are required to have a birth certificate on file. And so sometimes the kids here only have a birth certificate from another country. It's not recorded any place other than it is used to get immigration services, mainly in Title III, so that the kids can get help in learning English here. But that's a requirement of our state.
Do you have
But
something? I'm sorry, Liz. Please go ahead.
But it's not documented in our student information system. It's not, you know, teachers can go into a child's file, but most do not go in looking at the birth certificate. But it is, the birth certificates do have to be there.
We have to provide that in Massachusetts. So I don't know how a family without such paperwork or not comfortable sharing, I don't know how they would approach it. It is recorded. So my children are some of the only, we live in a rural town in Central Mass. We're like the only ones whose children were born outside of Massachusetts. And so often it's like written wrong because clearly they're not following it. So it's tricky. It is when you have these stipulations, how do you make it work? And it sounds like you're doing what you can, but you do have the home language survey. And Matt, do you have a home language survey in Milwaukee? I think you do. Oh, hold on a second. Oh, go ahead. Sorry,
I was muted. We do. I'm just not personally all that familiar with it, but we do have one.
Do you want to describe your role for Omaha Neighbors?
My role at Notre Dame?
Yes.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we so our school opened about 21 years ago as an all-girls middle school on the south side of Milwaukee, serving primarily Latina girls in grades 6, 7, and 8. A few years later, it expanded to be grades 5 through 8. About 6 years ago, we opened up a primary school, grades K4 through. Sorry, there's an announcement up on the. You can probably hear. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Grades K4 through 4 to kind of be a feeder school into our middle school, and we made that a school co-ed. At the time, we thought we would have a partnership with a boys' middle school, and kind of that everything would kind of work out. For various reasons, that did not work out. So we decided that the last phase of our school would be to add a boys' middle school program. So I was hired to be the director of the boys' middle school program this past summer, and we've been actively working to get everything set up for that this year, and we'll be officially starting that next school. So.
Thank you. It's exciting, and it's a really unique school. So thank you for describing that. So in some ways, you're in a similar position to the Omaha folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But in other ways, this is old hat because you've been at this. It's a very unique situation. It's a good thing. But they have a great team at Notre Dame. Wonderful team. So I think we'll all learn a lot from each other. So these are all some good thoughts. We've been talking about, the theme of the last 2 weeks has been, supporting the needs of immigrant students and their families. What are the needs? We've talked about the immigration needs, providing internet access at home that Megan mentioned. What are some other needs that you're seeing that perhaps surprised you, or you think the network should know more about?
Well, I just know, it depends on if a family that's coming new to our school, if they have other family in the area that they kind of can learn from, can get housing with, or can help them find jobs. We have had a couple families where, like, we become their support system. We're very lucky in that we have a program also out of Boston College called City Connects. So we have a licensed social worker here who can connect families into things that they need in the community. And so, she's helped. We have a backpack program on Fridays that sends food home to families so that children won't go hungry over the weekend. We have one of our parishes has a free store from St. Vincent de Paul Society that parents can go to once a month and get free clothes, free food items. And the City Connects coordinator can work on all of that. But I know there have been a couple families that just, one came because they had a very sick child, and they had been sent here because one of our children's hospitals was renowned for what this child had. And they literally have come to us, like, if they don't have money for rent, or if their kids get sick, what do we do next? Because they don't have any family and support systems here. So for some of our immigrant families, the school really has become a support system in getting them acclimated into the community.
I like how you put that the school is so much more than just a place to learn. And City Connects and the wraparound services that are provided through their embedded social workers is huge. It's expanding rapidly across the country, and the model is expanding as well. Thank you for sharing, Liz. Other thoughts?
I think for us, and I'm sure similar to others here, we do have several students who have had family members who have been deported recently. Just kind of being there as an emotional support structure for them. We're kind of hearing more about like incidents of trauma in kids' lives and how schools respond to those. That is a very traumatic incident in the life of a child. So our counselor's been doing a lot, but we're actively looking for more ways to better support our kids in dealing with that specific, very traumatic event that too many of them have faced.
Yes, I think that's true. It's like a death in a way, because it's so traumatic and there's such loss and confusion, especially if they're quite young. They may not understand, and frankly, as an adult, I'm not sure I understand all of it. There's a lot of complexity there, so that's good to think of it that way. So the local organizations that you've mentioned, Catholic Charities, the consulate, social workers, programs to provide internet. And Megan, as I was thinking about it, when I was working for United Way when we were based in Texas, there were programs to provide free cell phones as well. That has come and gone depending on various funding initiatives, but that may be there too through the local United Way. Is there anything that you would like to know more about? We'll try to embed it into our summer academy planning, future webinars. Is there any information that would be really helpful? I imagine legal information. I'm seeing lots of people nod their heads. Yes. I have high hopes we'll be able to get someone from BC Law to attend the academy. I've been involved in the academy since 2012, as have many of you, and the legal aspects have just gotten more and more significant each year, and the legal needs of the families enrolled in twin schools. So legal advice would be good. And your own liability as the school officials, as the teachers, what do you need to know?
One thing that I know we're looking at is parent engagement. And again, for some of our immigrant families or some of the families that are facing hardship, it's really difficult for them then to become engaged in the school life of their children because it's so foreign to what they understand. And so I guess I would be interested in knowing if there are family engagement programs that have worked for people, especially for the immigrant population. Okay. Who just trying to explain the differences between a public school, a charter school, which now is often in an old Catholic building, and a Catholic school. A lot of our families don't understand those differences. And so sometimes they go to a charter school thinking it's a Catholic school, and then we get the kids 2 or 3 years later and they're so far behind often that we just need to do a better job of helping immigrants understand the choices that they have in the American system and to help them be engaged.
It is a really complex system. My brother-in-law's from Brazil. When he was growing up, the best schools were the Catholic schools, and that's where you go. And when he came to the US, they had so many options. He ended up in a bilingual program for French speakers because they didn't know what to do with him. And so he said, I got really good at French. My English didn't get much better. And his mother and relatives were trying to figure out the system. So he lost about 18 months that he could have used, right? So there was that learning curve, that like the social stuff that he didn't have to deal with before. So I think that's a good point. I'm keeping an eye on the time. So
I was just gonna add to that too, that would be nice to be able to talk to. A lot of our students come to my school not at the beginning of their education, so not in preschool, not in kindergarten, but more like in 5th or 6th grade. So they come from a public school. So this is only my 2nd year here, and that's something that I noticed after the first year was, how do I then help those families, not just the children, but the whole family unit, become a part of our school and be engaged and understanding of our school.
Because there's a whole community that they're trying to plug into that might be quite connected and tight, and it's hard to join something like that late in the game. But they want a better education, so they're motivated.
Right.
So that would be tricky. So engagement at a lot of different levels, perhaps. Good, thank you. Okay. So some housekeeping items. I wish we had more time, but our friends from the Mountain and Pacific areas will start to arrive. So regional webinars are always quite interesting because people come and go throughout my evening, and it gets darker and darker behind me. I watch the sun go down, and tomorrow will get snowier and snowier. So that's just how it goes. Some things I want you to know. Our next webinar will be a whole network webinar at 4 p.m. Eastern. So that works a little differently. Please join us at 4 p.m. Eastern if you can. Otherwise, it will be up as a recorded webinar on our website. We'll be talking about NCEA, and we'll be bringing back our discussion about bilingualism and biliteracy. We've put that aside for a bit. I talked about it a bit in January, but then the needs for the legal aspects of DACA just kept getting more and more complicated. So I set that aside. Now, I think we're at an impasse with DACA. And so unfortunately, we'll just return to the bilingual stuff until we have some more information we can share. And if I can get the immigration lab from the BC Law School to join us, I'll stop it again and bring them in so they can share what they know. We have asked them to join us on a webinar, but they have taken their law students and their professors, and they're running pro bono legal clinics. I mentioned this to some of you before. They are constantly in court. I actually talked to one of them, and she's like, I'm walking into court right now. I know we were supposed to talk. I don't have time, but email me and I'll give you some resources. So the need is great. And we'll jump back into this discussion whenever we can and whenever we need to. But until then, we're going to get ready for NCEA. and talk also about bilingualism and biliteracy teaching techniques. Pedagogy. Are any of you going to NCEA?
No, we're using our money to go to the summer academy.
Yay! Very good. Who needs Cincinnati? That's okay. We'll go for you. We'll get all the important information and we'll bring it to the summer academy. Sound good? It's hard. It's hard to stretch your dollars. We totally understand. So we will be there and we will gather all kinds of interesting stuff and we'll bring it to the summer academy. So yeah, Cincinnati. All right. So now academy. Academy is exciting. It's going to be fun. The invoices will be going out in mid-March. So principals and consortium folks, be on the lookout for that. It will go by email. It'll come from my colleague, Anna. Once those are out, then the Roche Center, through my colleague Fabiola or myself, will be sending you information to gather the details for participants and the travel information. Do any of your team members have a food allergy we should know about? Are you arriving at a funny time? So we'll be going through all those details. Please ask your mentors, and we're still working on getting a mentor for Omaha, but for Minneapolis and Milwaukee, please make sure that Corey and Helena have registered. I believe they have, but I'm sorry, Matt, hold on.
Sorry.
Yes.
Helena has.
Yes, I think
well,
she has.
actually, I do have a question. You can, I don't
Please.
want to interrupt, but I do have a question.
No, please, we've got time.
When I filled out our form, I asked for 2 additional spots. I was thinking her as one of those 2. So
Okay,
so we really actually were only requesting 1 additional.
that's good to know. I'm going to make a note of that. So,
The next question was, when we would find out if we have.
So we are in the wonderful position that we have a limited space and a lot of interest. So we are going into our second round, and once we hear back from those particular schools, then we'll know how many extra spots we have.
And our mentor doesn't count for one of our 5, right?
No.
Okay, all right.
No. Good to find out though. But do keep at us that if you want these folks to come, we'll make sure they're on the wait list. Check on that wait list.
Check with you.
Call me every day. You can call me. You can email Fabiola. Okay. Or you can call Fabiola. Email is good, so then we have a written record of what we've said when. That just keeps us all organized. There are a lot of Annas, Marias, Chris's. There are a lot of and Marisols. We have so many Marisols. We have 4 Leticias. So there are a lot of repeated names. So it's great to have a written record of what we said when. But we do expect to have some extra spots, but the sooner you get yourself or your colleague on the wait list, the better, because this will go quickly. And we're excited that you want to get bigger teams. That's great. That really is great. If you have any special needs for the academy, or your colleagues do, let us know. Be very, very specific, and we'll do what we can to accommodate. It's going to be a very good time. We're working on some of the sessions now. And conversations like this help me to know what you really want to know. We want to make it as a rich and fun experience as we can, a very renewing and rejuvenating experience for your mind and your spirit, and to have some fun too. Last year's program, I happen to have it here. You'll get one of these books. It's quite extensive. And colorful and interesting, and in 3 languages. So it's going to be a really great time. So we thank you for making this time and sacrifice. We know it's a big ask, and we're glad that you'll be joining us. So those were the big things I wanted to mention. And so I thank you for your time. And if there are any other questions, we've got a couple minutes. I tried to be very strict on the time because I don't want to take too long or interfere with our next group that's coming on. But if there are any other pressing questions?
No.
Okay. See?
When is the book study gonna start?
So that's why that's what I meant by the bilingualism, biliteracy discussion. I tabled that because DACA just kept getting more and more complicated. But we're gonna bring that back, and I'll be sending out an email with that information. I've got some really interesting, very short case studies I'd like to share that will get us thinking and pushing our thinking. But I will be sending that out. Thank you, Liz. Okay. thank you everybody for sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate it. It was great to have all of you with us. And I know the Midwest is getting hit by snow, at least South Dakota is. And I know the West is huge. I'm from Ohio and people thought I was from Iowa, like all the time. That's a totally different place. But I have much empathy. Stay warm, stay safe, and we will talk soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.